What happened to Solo Leveling? It was supposed to be one of the biggest anime of the year, but by the end of season 1, it seemed like nobody really cared anymore. Which is crazy considering this was the same series that helped popularize webtoons, and was reviewed by just about every big name back before COVID. So with season 2 dropping soon and nobody really talking about it, I'd like to share my honest thoughts on season 1, talk about the hype prior to the anime and how we came to where we are now, and explain why I think season 2 will definitely be worth watching. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, let me just make sure we're clear on the state of Solo Leveling. In general, as a series, I'd say it's still very much a success. I'm not the biggest expert, but if I'm not mistaken, it started out as a light novel before getting adapted as a webtoon/manhwa. Now, before the anime was even announced, the webtoon was already a big hit. In fact, it was so popular that it was one of the few webtoons that you could actually buy in English in print at bookstores. And this was in the early days of webtoons' popularity. So there's no doubt that Solo Leveling was already a mainstream success prior to the anime. Then when the anime came out, it had a fair amount of hype. When the first couple of episodes dropped, people were going crazy over the dramatic plot twist. And then as the series continued, people had nothing but praise for the beautifully animated fight scenes, as well as some other praises. But it wasn't long before this anime fell off. And I don't mean fell off like, say, Seven Deadly Sins, where it suddenly turned into a complete dumpster fire. No, what happened to Solo Leveling was different. Speaking from my experience, I did what many anime fans do. I made all these big plans to watch X, Y, and Z anime every week, only to fall behind after 4 episodes. But I was still following the discourse on YouTube and Twitter, and while I saw more and more people get excited over Dungeon Meshi, and everyone go batshit crazy over Frieren, I really didn't see anyone talking about Solo Leveling. For the most part, nobody had anything bad to say, but nobody was really saying anything good either. So I was confused, because prior to the debut, everyone was hyping it up. And during those first few episodes, fans were saying how amazing it was. Then, radio silence. So as someone who had started the anime but was a bit behind, I thought nothing of it at first. That is until the end of the season when people started saying how overrated it was. But before I say more on that, make sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps spread the video to other viewers like you. Now, most likely, if you're thinking about watching Solo Leveling, you probably like shows like Jujutsu Kaisen, Berserk, or Attack on Titan. Anything with a lot of action. Nobody is trying to hide the fact that this is Solo Leveling's biggest appeal. So, that being said, it was really confusing to see the reviews for the anime towards the end of the season. Throughout all of the criticisms are the same recurring themes. One Mal user said there were no redeeming qualities besides the action, and the characters were, quote, bleak. Another Mal user said that the side characters were collateral damage for underdevelopment. Finally, one user describes the show as a mindless power fantasy, adding that it has no story and is bankrupt in originality. Evidently, people had a few choice words for the show after watching it. But like I said, they all come down to 2 basic complaints: action over story, and no side characters. Now, just to play devil's advocate, I can see where people are coming from. Solo Leveling heavily centers around Sung Jin-woo. Granted, this is the first season and it's only 12 episodes, so it kind of makes sense that the introduction to this story is spent developing the main character. That being said, the other characters aren't nearly as fleshed out. As one of these Mal users points out, the side characters feel more like pieces on the game board and less like real people. So when you're watching Solo Leveling, the only real incentive for investment is Jin-woo. If you're looking for a little more than that, and you're not crazy about Jin-woo to begin with, it makes sense why you wouldn't like this anime. On top of that, the majority of the story, while supplemented by the in-universe politics and world building, heavily consists of Jin-woo overpowering mobs, initially getting overwhelmed by bosses, and then unlocking even more busted abilities to overpower those bosses. I personally found this to be addictively entertaining. But again, if you're disenchanted by this power fantasy formula, then naturally this show has nothing to offer you since that's the majority of its appeal. So to that extent, I can see how someone might say this show has nothing to offer besides action. In fact, this only makes more sense when you consider the show's two competitors at the time, namely Frieren and Dungeon Meshi. Frieren was already an impossibly popular success in the prior fall season, so by the winter everyone was already obsessed with its characters. Anything besides that was like chopped liver. But you also had Dungeon Meshi, another beautiful fantasy series that prioritizes world building and comedy built on strong character chemistry. As a result, while not nearly as popular as Frieren, Dungeon Meshi gained a large share of everyone's attention during that winter season. So with Frieren completely dominating the mainstream and Dungeon Meshi winning over a lot of those same fantasy fans, it's easy to see why solo leveling quickly became an after, and stuff isn't as meticulously animated as Frieren or Dungeon Meshi. And while Sung Jin Woo is a cool character with plenty of badass moments, he carries the whole show. Meanwhile, both of these other shows offer a diverse cast of characters that consist of hilarious and charming dynamics. The fact of the matter is that these two fantasy shows are more lighthearted and down-to-earth, making them much more casual-friendly, whereas solo leveling fails to capture fans of the same basic genre because it prioritizes action over world building and character chemistry. It has a great main character and a fascinating power system, but clearly that wasn't enough since people wanted more shows like Frieren and Dungeon Meshi. Okay, so that's me playing devil's advocate. Now allow me to explain where I really stand. And really, there's two questions to think about. One, how good is Season 1? And 2, is Season 2 worth watching? So let me start with Season 1. Now again, I think the reception to Season 1 makes sense. Frieren and Dungeon Meshi conditioned people to like certain things, so any show that didn't do those same things was naturally going to feel worse by comparison. Solo leveling does not try to be anything like either of those two shows, hence why fans of those shows did not like this show. That being said, there should never have been any expectation that solo leveling was going to be somehow vulnerable or down to earth. Ever since the webtoon blew up, solo leveling has always been marketed on the basis of its action and its main character. And when they marketed the first season, they sold it on the same things. Everyone knew this, and everyone agreed this was what you're signing up for. Then after 3 or 4 episodes, everyone starts talking about how it's all about action and nothing else. Which to me is just about the silliest reason to hate the series ever. This is the same as if you went to McDonald's expecting a hamburger, got to McDonald's, asked for a hamburger, and then complained that you don't like McDonald's because they don't have hot dogs. Do you know how ridiculous it would be if you asked the person behind the register, how come you guys don't have hot dogs? It's McDonald's. They got fries, and most importantly, they got burgers. Solo leveling is McDonald's. It's got action, and it's got power fantasy flexing moments. If you wouldn't ask for a hot dog at McDonald's, then don't ask for slice of life character dynamics and solo leveling. And that's the other thing. People keep calling it a power fantasy. First of all, power fantasy is a fairly broad term, so anything could be a power fantasy, really. But people use it in this case to say all solo leveling is a story about flexing and pissing contests. And all I have to say is, okay, so what's the problem? Like, that's the best part of the story. I love all the badass moments. I won't spoil the final episode, but by the time I finished Season 1, I wanted to make some kinda undead brawler in Skyrim. That's how contagious this show is. So to call it a power fantasy like that's somehow a bad thing is really a kind of pretentious take. If you ask me, Season 1 isn't a 10 out of 10, but it's easily one of the most entertaining action thrillers I've ever watched, and I cannot recommend it enough. especially if you enjoy video games and fantasy series. But that's just Season 1. Now, if you were to ask me about Season 2, the answer is slightly more complicated. On the one hand, I've seen people drop this series, and I'm anime only, so I have no idea what comes next. Plus, a bunch of big-name YouTubers like RogersBase used to review the webtoon before, but whoever was in charge led one of the most aggressive ban waves I've ever seen. Like, even scarier than some of the stuff from Shueisha. We're talking like channels shut down in a matter of minutes. So that kinda left a bad taste to the point where I would be shocked if we ever seen a level of content for the series like that ever again. I bring this up because while you can find reviews and reactions to the anime, considering a lot of people dropped it and people who were originally fans are probably too scared or pissed off to review it again, I really don't see a lot of reviews and discussions for this series in the future. So if you're the type of person who wants to watch a show so you can discuss it with other fans, I can't really say you'll be able to do that for Season 2. Like, as a more recent example, apparently there was a solo leveling movie that just came out. I'm recording this like a week before the release, so I don't know what the reaction will be, but as of December 1st, I haven't seen a single person talk about it. If this were a series like Demon Slayer or even Black Clover and that happened, people would say the series was dead. So my estimation based on that is nobody will really be talking about Season 2. But on the other hand, solo leveling has a better chance in 2025. Its competition is Dr. Stone, a series which historically doesn't really stand out, and Sakamoto Days, which at this point is kind of a toss-up. So there's always the chance that Season 2 could pop off. In any event, Season 1 is seriously underrated, as it's incredibly addicting and a great story for any fantasy fan. For that reason, I have nothing but high hopes for Season 2. But now I'd like to hear what you think. How would you rate Season 1? What are your expectations for Season 2? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like to join me for more discussions like this one, then make sure to check out my live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. In those streams, I react to new manga chapters as well as discuss other anime and manga topics. Also, check out more discussions like this one in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.